And is there something more attractive to a conspiracy theory when it's seen to be believed by large numbers of people, or even a group that you identify with? Does that make the theory itself more attractive?
It might do. It might do. So certainly the kind of in-group element that you touched on there is quite big, because one thing that we see people who believe conspiracy theory is doing quite a lot, just building on this idea of their beliefs not playing nice with the world. What is one way you can get around that? Well, you can sort of change what parts of the world you're experiencing, right? You can be someone that watches mainstream news, which is going to constantly tell you, no, you're wrong, which is, of course, going to be unsettling. Or you could drift more towards, the term echo chamber is becoming quite popular these days. You can kind of insulate yourself. You can find like-minded people on Facebook or on Twitter and things like that. And they will continually reinforce your beliefs. You'll continually reinforce theirs. And you get kind of closed shop, and you get all the benefit. And then in addition to that, of course, you get all of the kind of regular benefits of being in a group, which we all enjoy to a degree, depending on what groups we're in. We like, feeling like we're part of something. We like having kind of positive social identity as well. And I guess this is one version of that is obviously quite specific to conspiracy belief. They could get something out of that, particularly if they are. So one thing that is often associated with conspiracy belief is being quite socially isolated as well. So that might be something that someone who believes these things lacks, that they then get via their belief. So it could make such beliefs more appealing, and there is definitely something to that.
Yeah, it's interesting, that point about isolated people might see it as a way of connecting with other people, possibly, or it might make them feel like they're part of a group that they lack in their life. Are there any other characteristics or traits or things that make people more susceptible to being attracted to something like that?
Yeah, so the one, of course, that I'd highlight, because it's definitely central to a lot of my work, is there is a cognitive element at play as well. So in terms of how people reason and how people think. So one factor that comes up quite a lot in the literature is reflective reasoning. And what I mean by that is essentially, I'm oversimplifying slightly, but it's kind of the ability to not run away with the first thing that comes to mind, but to stop and reflect on what you're thinking about and kind of think it out, basically. And what we find in a lot of studies is that people who believe in conspiracy theories are not very good at this. They tend to be quite bad on cognitive tests that measure reflective thinking. And we find that these are the sort of variables that are perhaps more directly related to the mechanisms behind how conspiracy theories are acquired. There are other kind of more distal factors as well. There are things like there's associations with education, for example. Pretty much as you'd expect, people with higher education levels have lower levels of conspiracy belief. We also find in some contexts that socioeconomic status can interact with that as well. But that seems to depend, it seems to operate via variables like reflective reasoning. If that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. And would it be fair to say that somebody who hasn't had academic training or is less educated would be more likely to not question assumptions or question assertions that don't have evidence?
That's a very good question, and I think it's tempting to think that. I think there is something quite parsimonious about that idea, right? This idea that so someone hasn't been to school or they haven't been to university or something like that. They haven't got the critical thinking skills needed to evaluate misinformation and things like that. I think the actual picture is slightly more complex. So we talked about uncertainty, for instance, and how exposure to uncertainty can make conspiracy beliefs quite appealing. I'd argue that people who are, as it were, maybe they come from a lower educational background or a lower socioeconomic background or so on. It might be that because of the challenges in their life that they face, because of inequality or things like that, that perhaps they are exposed to uncertainty more often.
Right.
And then for that reason, conspiracy beliefs perhaps some of the benefits, albeit the short-term psychological benefits to these beliefs, perhaps such benefits are more salient to such individuals.
Mm.
Whereas someone who's quite comfortable and perhaps doesn't necessarily need that comfort. I mean, it's definitely not unique to lower socioeconomic status, but that might be one reason why individuals from kind of lower educational backgrounds, there are kind of other factors in play that complicate the relationship a little bit. It does still seem to be there, but it's quite complicated, I think.
Thanks for watching that clip. You can watch the full episode right here. But until next time, don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you again for another one very soon.